The pavement was wet, not from rain but from the blood of a man who once held the power to fire 300 people with a single email. People passed, phones in hand, eyes averted, but she didn't. Wrapped in a threadbare coat and clutching a plastic bag with all her worldly possessions, she ran into the smoke. Before we dive in, if this story touched you, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications. It helps us grow and bring you more stories you love. Just a heads up, we don't just share stories here. We invite you to experience them. There's a little quiz at the end, just for fun. It's our way of saying thanks for watching closely and spotting the subtle moments others might miss. We might even pin the best answer. She had no name on the streets. Some called her Juno because she slept behind the boarded-up theater on Juno Street. Others didn't call her anything at all. But before the streets, Juno Williams had been a licensed nurse. Before addiction, before the accident that took her son, before the world stopped giving second chances. He was Grayson Cole, a tech billionaire, CEO of A.R.C Tech Industries, and the man behind the self-driving logistics revolution. That morning, Grayson was late, which rarely happened. He skipped his usual black coffee, ignored the forecast, and took a shortcut through Camden Bridge. What no one knew was that the brakes on his custom electric roadster were failing, and what no one expected was that Juno would be the only person who noticed the screech, the spiral, and the stillness. The bridge reeked of rust and rain. Buses roared past like mechanical beasts. Horns, sirens. A dog barked in the distance. A twisted mess of metal smoldered near the railing. One headlight flickered. A weak cough escaped from inside. Juno dropped her bag, slipped through the growing circle of frozen onlookers, and clawed open the crumpled driver's door. The heat from the battery pack singed her wrist. Glass dug into her palms as she dragged the unconscious man out, just seconds before the undercarriage hissed and burst into flame. A pop, then fire. Her own lungs burned, but she didn't let go. By the time paramedics arrived, Grayson's pulse was fading. At the hospital, Juno vanished. She refused interviews, slipped out before the cameras came. Security footage showed her wandering into the park across the street, shaking from adrenaline and trauma. Grayson awoke 2 days later, tubes in his arm, a brace on his leg. His assistant, Rami, explained what happened. "She saved your life," Rami said. "A woman from the street." Grayson didn't speak. He couldn't, not out of shock, but shame. See, just 2 days before the crash, Grayson had signed off on a city initiative to clear the homeless encampments around Midtown, to make space for a new innovation hub, one that bore his company's name, the same encampment where Juno had been sleeping. Grayson left the hospital in a wheelchair. The press called him reborn. But behind the smile, he was searching. Days turned to weeks. He hunted for her, through shelters, soup kitchens, outreach programs, until finally, at a midnight meal service behind a church, a familiar voice said quietly, "Didn't expect to see you vertical?" She was thinner, her coat more torn, but the eyes were the same. That night, in front of a table of strangers, Grayson knelt and said 6 words that made the entire room go silent. "Will you help me save others?" At first, Juno thought he was joking. She stared at him, blinking under the flickering light of the soup kitchen's back porch. A billionaire CEO, on one knee, like a man proposing not love, but redemption. He was in a designer coat, creased from weeks of hospital stays, his left leg still bound in a brace, but his eyes were sincere. "Save others?" she asked slowly. Grayson nodded. "People like you saved me," he said. "Now I want to build something with you, not for charity, for change." Murmurs buzzed around the folding tables. A few heads turned. A volunteer dropped a ladle. The next day, the story broke. Billionaire CEO launches homeless innovation lab with the woman who saved his life. It spread like wildfire. CNN called it the most unexpected partnership of the year. LinkedIn praised it as a masterclass in purpose-led leadership. But on social media, the people said it loudest. This is what real change looks like. From the streets to strategy rooms, go Juno. Finally, a CEO putting people over profit. Within a week, Grayson and Juno were standing side by side at a press conference. Not in a corporate auditorium, not in a marble hall, but beneath the very same bridge where it all began. The air that morning smelled like wet concrete and blooming jasmine from a nearby planter. Microphones lined a repurposed folding table. Behind them, a massive banner read, "Project Phoenix." The message was simple: rebuild from the ashes, together. Grayson spoke first, humbly, haltingly. He didn't talk about the crash. He didn't need to. Instead, he introduced Juno as his partner and as the heartbeat of an idea that might just change how cities saw the unseen. And then, Juno took the mic. Her voice cracked at first, not from fear, but from weight. 2 months ago, I was sleeping on a cardboard mat, praying for a warm meal, she began. Now I'm standing here, not as a symbol, but as a builder, a nurse, a mother, and someone who knows firsthand what happens when the world gives up on you. The silence was electric. Reporters didn't blink. One woman in the crowd wiped her eyes and then slowly, applause. Not polite claps, but the kind that builds in layers, from gratitude, from awe. By the end of that week, over $18 million had been pledged from investors, philanthropists, and even rival CEOs. But Grayson made it clear, we're not just building shelters, we're building systems. Project Phoenix wasn't just a safe space, it was a pipeline. Modular housing with healthcare clinics, AI-driven job placement engines tailored to skills, not resumes, mental health pods staffed by professionals who understood trauma. And at the center of it all, Juno. Every blueprint bore her initials. Every planning meeting started with her voice, but not everyone cheered. Behind closed doors, boardroom whispers grew louder. Some shareholders worried Grayson had gone soft. Activism doesn't drive revenue, one VP muttered during a heated call. Emails leaked. Headlines questioned his motives. Has Grayson Cole lost focus? Activism or PR? From boardroom titan to bridge crusader. But Grayson didn't flinch. And Juno, she didn't even glance. Because real change never comes clean. It comes with scars. And both of them had enough scars to know, you fight anyway. 6 weeks in, Project Phoenix opened its first pilot site in East Lincoln, the city's most neglected borough. Instead of ribbon-cutting ceremonies, they held a meal. Barbecue, rice and beans, live music. Residents, many still technically homeless, called it the best food they'd had in years. One woman, trembling as she held her toddler, approached Juno after the meal. "You don't know me," she whispered, "but you saved my brother last month. EMT said you kept him from seizing till they arrived. He made it because of you." Juno just smiled. No cameras, no hashtags, just impact. Meanwhile, Grayson was back at A.R.C HQ, but something had shifted. He started offering paid sabbaticals for employees to volunteer at shelters. He adjusted product roadmaps to prioritize accessibility and education. And he mandated all senior staff attend street immersion sessions, led by Juno and her team, to see what people lived through before they wrote policies about them. Even skeptics began to admit, this is working. Employee morale is up. Turnover's down, innovation's up. Investors, they're curious, in a good way. And yet, beneath the surface, tension brewed. One night in a quiet corner of the Phoenix Planning Lab, Juno found a sealed envelope. No name, just the words, "Don't trust him, he's using you." She stared at it for a long time. She didn't open it, but she didn't throw it away either. In the boardrooms, pressure mounted. Grayson received an anonymous tip. A vote was being planned, a quiet coup. If passed, he'd be ousted as CEO within weeks. He looked at the numbers, then at a photo on his desk, not of his yacht, not of the A.R.C headquarters, but of the bridge, twisted metal, a crumpled coat, and a woman silhouetted against the firelight, pulling him from death. He knew what he had to do, but that choice would change everything. And what he did next would leave Juno and the world absolutely shocked. The following Monday, Grayson arrived at A.R.C headquarters before sunrise. The glass tower loomed above the city like a monument to ambition. But this time, the elevator didn't take him to the penthouse boardroom. It stopped 3 floors below, at the Innovation Lab, a floor he had secretly funded, but never stepped into since his recovery. Inside, dozens of engineers, designers, and community advocates were huddled around whiteboards and screens. Models of modular shelters, predictive social support software, a mobile app to help locate lost family members through encrypted local databases, all powered by the same infrastructure that once delivered groceries with drones. Grayson walked to the center and cleared his throat. "I'm transferring ownership of this entire lab to Project Phoenix." Silence, then gasps. "You're what?" someone asked, stunned. He smiled. "From this day forward, this team, your salaries, your patents, your pipeline, you report to Juno Williams. She'll co-lead with me until I no longer can." That announcement sent shockwaves through the tech world. Wired magazine called it the most radical corporate power transfer since Jobs returned to Apple. Forbes featured Juno on its cover. From pavement to power, the woman who's redefining leadership. Overnight, speaking invitations flooded in. Harvard, TED, the United Nations. But Juno turned most of them down, because while the world was praising her, she was busy walking the site of the second Phoenix Center, this time on the west side of Detroit. Grayson was there too, in jeans and a hoodie, hauling bags of cement, cracking jokes with former construction workers who had once slept in their cars. One man, an ex-steelworker named Miguel, asked quietly, "You really a CEO?" Grayson grinned. "Last I checked." Miguel nodded toward Juno, who was reviewing blueprints under a scaffold. "She's the real boss, huh?" Grayson chuckled. "She always was." By month 3, Project Phoenix had launched its 3rd site, this time in a town no one expected, Fairgrove, Ohio. Population 4,000. Why? Because someone on Juno's outreach team discovered that 35% of Fairgrove's residents were food insecure, and half were elderly. The local mayor, skeptical at first, watched in awe as prefab housing units arrived within a week. Solar panels installed in 4 days. Medical volunteers recruited from nearby universities. A retired woman named Edna stood in front of the new mobile clinic and whispered, "I haven't seen this much hope in 30 years." Back in the city, something stranger happened. Other CEOs started copying them, but not the way you'd think. They weren't just donating, they were showing up. David Kwok, founder of a billion-dollar shipping firm, volunteered to mentor Phoenix residents on logistics careers. Samantha Rojas, a fashion CEO, donated not clothes, but design space, where single moms could learn tailoring and branding. One week, Juno walked into a Phoenix kitchen and saw a man washing dishes. She froze. It was Malcolm Trask, the founder of VertiBank, a man who once called homelessness a side effect of laziness. He didn't notice her at first, but when he did, he simply said, "I got it wrong." Meanwhile, the pressure inside A.R.C's boardroom reached a boiling point. 4 board members demanded an emergency vote. "Phoenix is costing us margin," one argued. "Grayson's personal crusade is becoming a liability," another added. But they underestimated how many A.R.C employees had joined Phoenix part-time. A petition circulated internally. Over 1,200 employees signed, "We believe in the mission. Remove Grayson and you lose us." News leaked. The stock dipped, then rebounded 20% in 2 days, as investors realized retention was higher, innovation was faster, and the public trust in A.R.C was at an all-time high. CNBC called it the Phoenix effect. Juno, watching from the sidelines, stayed focused. One evening, she sat on the edge of her cot in a Phoenix shelter, still choosing to sleep among those she served, and opened the envelope she had kept for weeks. The one that read, "Don't trust him, he's using you." Inside was a photo. It showed Grayson 10 years ago, at a gala sponsored by a real estate firm notorious for evictions and slumlord practices. Juno stared at it, then flipped it over. There was a note in Grayson's handwriting. "This is who I was. Thank you for helping me become who I want to be." She didn't speak of it to anyone, but the next day she arrived at the Phoenix board meeting and handed Grayson a new document, a proposal to turn Project Phoenix into a global blueprint, one that cities could replicate with open-source infrastructure, shared protocols, and community-led governance. "I want us to go bigger," she said, "but only if we go together." Grayson looked at the proposal, then at her, and nodded. Still, the clock was ticking. That secret vote to remove him, it was still on the calendar. And Grayson knew it, but he also knew this. What they had built was already bigger than him, and that was the real win. The morning of the board vote, Grayson arrived at headquarters without a tie, without an entourage, and, most notably, without fear. Juno wasn't with him. She was in Cape Town, walking the rocky ground of a township where Phoenix's 4th international pilot site had just broken ground. She'd been invited to meet with local community leaders, not in a conference room, but in their homes, their clinics, their classrooms. Back in the States, cameras swarmed A.R.C's lobby. The board vote had gone public. Every major outlet was covering it. Is this the end of the CEO who changed everything? Will A.R.C abandon its humanitarian pivot? Investors divided as Phoenix popularity skyrockets. But inside, Grayson didn't waste his breath defending himself. He simply stood, faced the 12 board members, and projected a live stream from Phoenix Site 5, which had opened that morning in Newark, New Jersey. The footage showed a young woman, formerly unhoused, leading a digital literacy workshop for teenage mothers. Another clip showed men in neon vests installing solar panels, all formerly incarcerated, all graduates of the Phoenix Job Rehab Program. The final image? A little girl handing a thank you note to a volunteer in a bright blue vest that read, "Hope is a system." The room fell still. "I didn't build this alone," Grayson said softly, "but if you vote me out, know this, Phoenix will not die. It's no longer an idea. It's a movement." He left the room before the vote was called. Meanwhile, Juno walked into a small school in Kailicha. The kids had prepared a surprise, a hand-painted mural showing 2 figures, one pulling another from fire, the other holding blueprints over a foundation shaped like a heart. They called it The Rise. That night, she video called Grayson. "They painted you with a cape," she laughed. "I don't deserve a cape," he replied. Juno paused. "You might not, but you do deserve credit." Grayson didn't answer. Instead, he just stared at her through the screen and said, "Whatever happens tomorrow, don't stop." This was always bigger than a vote. The next day, Phoenix Site 6 opened in Seattle. This one had something new, a fully integrated AI clinic assistant developed by A.R.C engineers volunteering their nights. The assistant could check vitals, triage symptoms, connect users to local care providers, translate between 5 languages, and it had a name, Juno 1. Reporters asked if it was named after the woman who saved Grayson. He simply said, yes. But more importantly, it's named after someone who refused to stay silent, no matter how many people tried to erase her. Donations surged, so did global interest. By week's end, city councils in Toronto, Jakarta, Mumbai, and Dublin were in active talks to bring Phoenix in. The World Health Organization requested a briefing. The UNDP extended an invitation to their summit on urban resilience. And Time magazine featured both Grayson and Juno on the cover with the headline, "The Fire and the Bridge, How One Crash Sparked a Global Rethink of Homelessness." Inside A.R.C, the board's vote concluded. The results were sealed. A courier brought the envelope to Grayson's desk. He didn't open it. Instead, he slid it into a drawer, locked it, and walked out. Straight to the new Phoenix Logistics Hub, where he spent the day unloading pallets of meal kits and laughing with volunteers. He figured, if they removed him, he'd know soon enough. But right now, people were hungry, kids were arriving, and systems needed testing. That was more important. Juno, back from South Africa, was invited to speak at Columbia University's School of Public Policy. Her first line stunned the crowd. "Policy can't fix what pride refuses to see." Then she explained how cities often plan around the vulnerable, not with them, and how Phoenix had flipped that by hiring architects who had lived in shelters. By building housing with dignity, not efficiency. By restoring agency, not just providing beds. The crowd gave a standing ovation. The dean called it the most powerful guest lecture in a decade. Even critics began to soften. One op-ed read, "I called it a publicity stunt, But I've now met 5 people with jobs, homes, and health because of Phoenix. And it's working. It's working better than we imagined. Still, the pressure wasn't gone. Activist investors prepared to force A.R.C to spin Phoenix off into a nonprofit, to get it off the books. Media outlets began speculating again. Will Phoenix lose its backbone if Grayson is removed? Juno Williams. The future of tech-driven humanitarian leadership? The vote result is coming, but will it even matter? And yet, none of that stopped the 7th Phoenix site, this time in New Orleans, where hurricane survivors, veterans, and displaced families built side by side on land once flooded with despair. They called this one Phoenix Delta. The slogan, painted in giant white letters across a warehouse wall, read, "We rise because we build together." The warehouse wasn't finished, but that didn't stop the people from showing up. In the sweltering New Orleans heat, volunteers worked beside newly housed residents, setting up pop-up showers, laying the first bricks of what would become the Phoenix Delta Community Kitchen. Across the lot, children colored chalk outlines of their dream homes on the pavement, all boxy and wild and filled with hope. Juno walked through it all with sleeves rolled, clipboard in hand, sweat on her brow, and resolve in her stride. Someone asked her when they were planning a ribbon cutting. She just smiled. "We don't do ribbon cuttings. We do first meals." Back at A.R.C headquarters, the sealed envelope still sat in Grayson's drawer, unopened. It had been 4 days since the vote. The media was getting antsy. Rumors swirled, articles speculated. Why hasn't Grayson opened the vote result? Symbolic delay or strategic defiance? CEO or martyr? Grayson ignored it all. Instead, he flew to Minneapolis, where a Phoenix-designed emergency shelter had quietly been activated to house over 120 families displaced by a recent factory fire. No press, no fanfare, just action. Local officials were stunned. "We didn't even know they were coming," one councilwoman said. "They just showed up with housing, food, and doctors, like they'd planned for the crisis before it happened." And that's exactly what they had done. Phoenix's internal AI systems, running on donated A.R.C infrastructure, had begun predicting vulnerable zones using climate, infrastructure, and poverty data. They weren't just responding to crises anymore. They were getting ahead of them. It made headlines. Phoenix predicts and prevents disaster fallout before FEMA can respond. Tech humanitarianism hits a new gear. Can algorithms heal what bureaucracy delays? Investors, once skeptical, were suddenly paying attention again. Not just for ethical reasons, but because Phoenix had become the most effective real-time crisis deployment model in the Western Hemisphere. But not everyone was celebrating. Inside the upper ranks of A.R.C, the friction continued to grow. Emails surfaced, anonymous leaks. A handful of execs feared Phoenix's influence was softening the company's edge in the enterprise market. A private email between 2 senior VPs read, "If this continues, A.R.C becomes a nonprofit mascot, and Grayson becomes a myth." Another email, later leaked to the press, was more blunt. "She's too popular, too trusted. Juno could take the whole company if she wanted." Juno didn't want the company. She wanted the world to build better. But that didn't stop a group of investors from approaching her quietly, offering to back her alone if she ever wanted to launch a standalone Phoenix enterprise without A.R.C strings. They promised full funding, international reach, her name in lights. She said she'd think about it. And then she flew to Chicago to meet with a 14-year-old girl who had just completed the Phoenix Youth Mentorship Program and was now presenting her first community tech prototype at a local STEM fair. Juno spent the whole day with her. She didn't mention the investors once. Meanwhile, Phoenix Site 8 opened in Sao Paulo, Brazil, a partnership with a local community group that had been fighting eviction threats for over a decade. This time, the Phoenix team didn't build shelters. They helped secure land rights. They trained local leaders in governance. They deployed legal AI tools to expedite stalled cases. One resident cried during an interview, "No one had ever given us more than tarps and promises. Phoenix gave us tools and said, 'You lead.'" Still, the vote loomed. The unopened envelope, the mounting boardroom tension, the feeling that something was about to shift. That weekend, Juno called Grayson. Why haven't you opened it?" He was quiet for a long time. "Because it doesn't change what we're doing." She sighed. "If you're out, it changes who gets to keep doing it." Grayson smiled. "You've always had the power to lead this, Juno. You didn't need me to hand it to you." She didn't say it aloud, but in her heart, she wasn't sure she agreed. Because what they'd built together, the unlikely alliance of boardrooms and backstreets, it was rare and precious. That same week, Phoenix's community voting system launched. It was the first of its kind, a blockchain-based resident voting app that let every person in a Phoenix community vote on local projects, from gardens to policy changes to new employment programs. And it worked. One resident in Oakland said, "I've never been asked to vote on anything that directly touched my life. This makes me feel human again." Another mother posted a photo, her daughter aged 7 casting her vote on a touchscreen next to her. Caption, "Civic engagement starts here." That post went viral. 4.2 million views. Phoenix Power trended for 3 days straight, and yet still, the envelope sat unopened. By week 9 of the Phoenix Initiative, the landscape of humanitarian infrastructure had shifted so visibly that even the most hardened policymakers began to take note. U.S. mayors from 25 cities signed a joint letter urging Congress to consider the Phoenix model as a national framework for urban response, calling it the most efficient, humane, and community-empowered solution we've seen in a generation. The United Nations published a policy brief titled, "From Crisis to Community: Why the Phoenix Model is Rewriting Recovery." And at the World Economic Forum, a panel that was meant to debate the role of tech in social justice ended up unanimously praising Phoenix's impact. One delegate from Singapore said it best: "They didn't just disrupt homelessness, they dignified it." Juno watched all this unfold, but she wasn't at a conference or in front of a camera. She was in Phoenix Site 9, which had just launched in Gary, Indiana, where old steel mills rusted beside half-empty neighborhoods. This site was different. It featured the first vertical farming initiative, designed to grow produce for Phoenix kitchens while employing residents as agri-tech operators. It was powered entirely by solar panels from a repurposed car lot. Inside one greenhouse, a 61-year-old man named Terrence, who had been homeless for 11 years, proudly showed Juno his sprouting tomatoes. "I named this one after my grandson," he said, misting the plant gently. "It's the first thing I've grown that didn't die on me." Juno didn't respond with words. She just put a hand on his shoulder. That was the story. Back at A.R.C, tensions reached a tipping point. 2 senior board members abruptly resigned, citing a fundamental disagreement with the company's evolving priorities. In their place, 2 new appointees were sworn in, both with backgrounds in public health and social tech entrepreneurship. The board dynamic was shifting. So was the culture. Junior engineers began forming after-hours Phoenix clubs, where they designed microservices and open-source APIs to help new cities onboard to the platform. A group of UX interns pitched a simplified version of the Phoenix app, one that could be used by people with zero digital literacy. It got greenlit. In less than 3 weeks, it rolled out in 5 cities. And yet, the envelope remained sealed. Grayson kept it in his drawer untouched. One morning, as he sipped his coffee on the rooftop of A.R.C's HQ, looking down over the city, his assistant Rami finally asked, "Why keep it if you're never going to open it?" Grayson's answer was simple: "Because it's not the future I'm worried about anymore. It's the momentum." Meanwhile, Phoenix's first national report was published. The numbers stunned even its critics. 98% retention rate in job placements. 91% of former residents reported improved mental health. Over 6,000 people transitioned from shelters to permanent housing in under 60 days. 42 cents of every dollar spent was returned in public benefit savings within 3 months, a figure never seen before in humanitarian aid. The report went viral. Policymakers, mayors, nonprofits, tech executives. They all wanted to know one thing: how was this possible? The answer: because it wasn't built to impress shareholders, it was built to serve people. Still in the background, the power struggle quietly simmered. Internal meetings grew tense. A few Phoenix team members reported that their access to certain A.R.C tech systems had been restricted. Emails went unanswered. And then, a leak. An anonymous document surfaced online, suggesting that a shadow vote had already taken place to remove Grayson. The internet exploded. Speculation, outrage, hashtags. Let Phoenix lead trended globally. Juno was on a plane to Vancouver when she saw the story break. She stared at her phone, then closed it. When she landed, she didn't head to her hotel. She went straight to Phoenix Site 10, the newest project in East Hastings, one of the most marginalized neighborhoods in Canada. There she met an 11-year-old boy named Khalil, who had spent the last year bouncing between motels. He now had a bed, a tutor, and a dream to be an architect. He showed Juno a notebook full of sketches. One of them, a redesign of the very Phoenix Center they were standing in. Juno crouched beside him, smiling. "Think you could design our next one?" He grinned. "I already did." Back at A.R.C Tech, the envelope was no longer in Grayson's drawer. It had been taken by someone inside, and this time, it was opened. But not by Grayson, not by Rami, not by Juno, someone else, and they didn't keep it quiet. They sent a photo of its contents to every major news outlet in the city, with a single subject line: "The truth comes out." The photo hit every news feed by sunrise. It wasn't scandalous in the way people expected. No corruption, no financial misconduct, no hidden deals. Just a single-page memo, clean, final, stamped. Board resolution, effective immediately. Grayson Cole is removed from his position as CEO of A.R.C Tech. Signed by a majority of the board. Dated 2 weeks ago. What made the world stop wasn't that he had been removed. It was the fact that he already knew. He had known for days. He had continued showing up, building shelters, serving meals, flying to sites, and never once mentioned it. The backlash was swift and loud. Protests formed outside A.R.C Tech headquarters before noon. Phoenix volunteers lined the sidewalks with signs that read, "He didn't fall, he rose." You can fire a CEO, but not a calling. Phoenix isn't a job, it's a movement. Social media erupted with posts from around the world. Former Phoenix residents shared side-by-side photos of their lives before and after. One man in Atlanta posted a clip of his daughter's 3rd birthday party held at a Phoenix family shelter. He added, "You fired a man, but you can't fire what he gave us." The hashtag number sign still building trended for 48 hours straight. And Grayson? He was in Detroit, helping paint a mural on the wall of Phoenix Site 11, a former steel assembly plant now converted into a full-service, zero-barrier recovery and training center. The mural depicted a rising sun split down the middle, one side showing ruins, the other rebirth. At the center stood 2 silhouetted figures, one holding a blueprint, the other a trowel. A reporter finally caught up to him there. "Mr. Cole, how do you respond to the board's decision?" Grayson set his brush down, smiled. "I built A.R.C Tech to scale ideas. I built Phoenix to scale hope. One can run without me. The other has to run without me. That was always the point." Juno, watching the news from a volunteer kitchen in Vancouver, didn't speak for a long time. The staff around her waited, unsure what she'd do. Would she fight the board? Break away and launch Phoenix on her own? Instead, she opened her laptop and started typing. By sunset, a 14-page proposal hit the inboxes of mayors in 15 cities. The title? Phoenix Without Borders, a Framework for Global Urban Recovery. Within 24 hours, New York pledged a citywide pilot. Dublin requested a full Phoenix toolkit. Nairobi asked to collaborate on a rural adaptation model. Phoenix was no longer a program. It was becoming a platform. Open, global, unstoppable. That same week, the Phoenix Community Portal hit 1 million users. The app now featured direct voting on site-level issues, live updates on construction timelines, access to education, healthcare, and legal aid, volunteer pairing and job referrals, and the ratings? 4.9 stars, in over 23 languages. A post on Reddit went viral. "I've never seen tech this transparent, and I've worked in Silicon Valley for 12 years. It's like someone actually trusted people to solve problems." Meanwhile, in a small town outside Memphis, Phoenix Site 12 opened its doors. This one had something new again. A music studio, not fancy, but clean, safe, open 24/7, equipped with donated instruments and staffed by volunteer producers. It was built because a teenager named Marcus had once asked Juno, "Can you heal from the streets if you can't speak your pain?" Now kids lined up to record their stories, their pain, their dreams. One song, Rise Again, became the unofficial anthem of the Phoenix movement. It trended on TikTok, it played at protests, and it echoed from the walls of shelters all over the country. In the middle of all this, Juno received a letter, typed, no return address. Inside was a scan of the original vote memo. On the back, someone had written in pen, "They took the title, but not the torch. It's yours now." Gee, she didn't cry. She got up, walked outside, and joined a team digging the foundation for a new solar-powered medical pod. She didn't need a title either, because the mission had never needed permission. And while the media was still buzzing about Grayson's removal, Phoenix Site 13 quietly launched in Lisbon, Portugal. This one was completely community-run. No corporate tie-ins, no government grants, just shared protocols, a digital backbone, and a circle of trained local organizers. And it worked. One Lisbon official said, "This is not a system you own, it's a system you share." And that is rare. Sometimes the people who lose everything are the ones who teach us how to build what truly matters. Grayson lost his title, Juno lost her home, but together, they created something no boardroom could control. A system not built on profit, but on purpose. A movement that asks a simple question: what if hope wasn't random? What if it was engineered brick by brick, hand in hand? And maybe that's what rising from the ashes really means. Not returning to who you were, but becoming who you were meant to be. When the world finally stops looking past you and starts listening. If this story moved you, drop a comment below telling us where you watch from and what moment hit you hardest. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you never miss stories like this. Stories that don't just entertain, but remind us who we are when no one's watching. And hey, there's a quiz at the end of this video. A little something for those of you who really paid attention. Catch the details. Spot the turning point. We might just pin your answer. Until next time, keep building what matters. Because sometimes the greatest empires are born under bridges. What was the name of the AI assistant launched at Phoenix Site?